Okay, so I saw my couple last night. I've been working with since, oh God, like May, June. Um,
Mm.
I haven't seen them in a couple weeks. And when they arrived, you could tell there was a lot of tension in the air. And right away, there was a lot of client A, the wife was just like really saying they're not doing well, they're fighting a lot. So we kind of looked at what's been going well when they're fighting and like what's going well in terms of like after the conflict and how they're communicating, rather than focusing solely on like what hasn't been going good over the past few weeks. Um,
Mm.
so that was helpful. But in short, her
It's
husband,
hard to do that when you could feel the energy in the room,
yeah,
right? To ask about positive, it kind of flips it, right? Yeah.
yeah. So I acknowledge the kind of the negative and the fighting that's going on, but I asked to switch gears and just look at what's been going well when they're fighting, or like what are they noticing that's been a little different.
Mm.
And they
And
were
that's new for
able,
you to ask about that?
yes, because
Yeah.
they would come in focusing more so on what hasn't been going well, or
Mm.
focusing on, you know, when they're seeing me consistently, it's going really good. But if they
Right.
take that break, like for a week or
Right.
something, it doesn't. So kind of trying to acknowledge the work they're doing versus it being like
Mm.
me as the reason they're,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. No, that's important to help integrate. Also for you to assess where they're at, and like
yeah,
you have a sense of kind of what they did last session as far as a step or a risk, right? Like the
mhm,
edge of their experience, because in the sessions they're kind of doing the hardest work, and then to see what they're able to translate into the real world, like outside a session, can give you that sense of like the positive, like the efforts that they've been putting
yeah,
in, but also to understand um, how they understand the model and how they what the insight they have around what is or isn't going well, right? If they just jump in and they're leading with this is what we want to work on today, it's usually one person kind of dictating that, and it's like
mhm,
this one I want to work on. Whereas if you start to show by being directive around like this is what I want to know what's going well, and what about for you, what's going well, and then what's that like to see, or have you noticed that, that this is what they've been working on, have you noticed that as well? Yes. It's like, okay, you get a more complete picture, I think, of
mhm.
where they're really at, you know?
Yeah, and I noticed that it was beneficial yesterday because when they came in with such you could just feel the tension of what's been going on right when I met with them. It was nice to kind of take a pause in jumping right into what's been going wrong, so to speak, for them, and kind of look at how it's been, what efforts have been put in. So
Mm.
when meeting with them, client A expressed, um, client B has been started drinking again, and that's the reason why they haven't been getting along. And so when client B started talking, he expressed it had nothing to do with drinking. He had a 1 week bender. He mentioned, he's an addict. He's not drinking anymore. Um, Client A was quite upset because client B used magic mushrooms 2 days in a row, which they mentioned that he had an experience where he was no longer going to allow anger in his life. He kind of had this epiphany where he was no longer going to allow it. So when connecting with client B, he mentioned, yeah, he had this epiphany that he's always had a lot of anger directed towards him since he was really little. Whether even in relationships, he mentioned 2 previous relationships with girlfriends, they were really angry, really abusive. And he's mentioned many times that client A gets really angry when they're upset. So he was saying he's no longer going to be taking anger in any capacity.
What does that mean? I'm just curious. Like not letting it in as setting boundaries, that sense, or not letting it in as far as like um I'm gonna like try to see beyond the anger. Like what does it mean for him?
Yeah, so when asking him kind of to explain a little bit more as to like this epiphany, he kind of meant like when it's directed to him and they're somebody is angry with him, and their voice, their tone, they're showing anger, he's no longer going to allow it. He's just going to walk away or not let it in.
Yeah.
um
Do you know what I noticed with the quote, the words that I think he used, and you maybe quoted him on, is anger targeted towards me,
Mhm.
right? Because that's a narrative, right?
Yeah.
That's not an objective fact, right? Anger for her is how she, comfortably expresses herself.
Mhm.
It's a this is EFT talk. It's a mirror of what's going on internally for her based on what she's experiencing, right? And the narrative and the sensitivity that she has around his behavior. But he sees it as at him. That's part of the dance, right?
Yeah.
um, if he was to see it as, she has an experience, tell me more, what's coming up for you, that'd be a very, very different conversation, right? So
Mhm.
it's a little bit of a slippery slope, right? Because all it's going to do is feed the cycle of like, well, I'm just going to make my sensitivity really small. I notice anger, because who's to say targeted at me, not targeted at me? Anger is anger. It's always externalized, right?
Yeah.
And he shuts off, and that's going to feed the cycle, in my opinion.
And that's why like when you mentioned that kind of, I noticed, I was kind of like, that's interesting, because where's this gonna go and how is this gonna impact their cycle and their dance, in the sense of it's a quite cold cut, like no more.
Yeah.
And client A mentioned like, okay, but I show anger, I show emotion, I've always been an emotional person. And she brings it back to being able to express herself as a child, like her family was quite open to
Yeah,
expressing your emotion.
that's exactly it. Like, so what does that mean for me as so I'm not able, if I can't, if I'm not, if I'm only allowed to show you things once I've dealt with them and I'm in a better place, or I'm only allowed to show you within your parameters of what you're going to be okay or not okay with, right? It's like, it's limiting.
Mhm.
It's
So
also black and white, right? Like,
yeah.
what rate, there's no such thing as on or off when it comes to anger. It's all degrees, right? It's like turning the knob off, on and
Yeah.
off.
So we dove into that a little bit more, and it was interesting because client B typically is quite reserved in session. And this session, they showed a lot of emotion. I noticed a lot of anger coming up and frustration. Um, and client A was kind of saying like, okay, I can't express myself when it comes to anger now. And
So this has now been going on. The mushroom thing happened.
yeah,
So it's not just what will happen, but what's happened since then, right? Like, there's been
yeah,
some times where kind of more choosing to shut down, as opposed to, you know, shutting down out of habit, or out of like feeling overwhelmed.
yeah. And that's what we actually talked a little bit about, was with client B. He's always felt like anger was directed towards him. He always feels like belittled and small and shrunken,
Yeah.
and kind of just goes quiet and gets kind of,
Yeah.
as he feels shrunk. So now he's like, no more. He's not taking anger
Got it.
anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and he expressed kind of like how that looked in past relationships and how it came up. And client A kept feeling like he was comparing her to his previous relationships, because he kept saying, they were really angry, but she's not as bad as
Mm.
them. She's a
Yeah,
lot
he's
better.
projecting this past onto me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we chatted a little bit about that, and he actually kind of expressed where he's been at, and he brought up a really important moment for him, was where they've been fighting a lot for the past few days. And client A said, her patients were running really thin with him. It was just constant fighting. And he ended up missing an appointment, which he felt really anxious about and felt really bad. And he tried to speak with her, and she said, just give me a moment. And she met him downstairs, and he was quite anxious and upset that he missed this appointment. And
And he missed it because of the fighting, and
he missed it just because he forgot,
oh,
and
okay.
but he felt really upset about it and quite anxious about the situation. And he said he just needed her to wrap her hand around his shoulder and just be there. But client B expressed that client A came off as, you need to fix this. And so he felt just shut down and not
Yeah,
supported emotionally.
he asked for it, yeah, and he didn't get it.
Yeah.
He's
And
opening himself up for something good, but then he got kind of the cycle. Yeah.
and client A expressed, well, how is it, how am I supposed to just be there when like my patients, we've been fighting for so many days, and how can I just put that all to the side? And client B said, well, you have to put it to the side and just be there. And so there's like this, it feels quite complex in the sense of client B just wants client A to like put it to the side.
My needs over yours. Yeah.
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 So that's kind of the gist of what was going on for
Yeah.
the session.
Yeah. So a big piece, and I'm sure you did to some extent, but just to highlight it even more, is it sounds like there's this kind of evolution, or this epiphany that he went through, where he got really good insight on what's missing, and in essence, like, healthy anger is the primary experience that is allowing him to put in these boundaries in place, right? So it's
Mhm.
coming from a really good place. Where I was talking about the slippery slope of what that could look like is a separate issue, but in the moment, it sounds like he's describing something that's really good for him, right? Like, that's what I'm hearing. So I think that would be something to really validate, and to really to cherish. You know, there's um there's um there's a piece in general around being able to reflect something in a validation without invalidating the other person. And
Mm.
this could be one of those times where it's challenging to kind of walk that line. How do you validate but then not trigger the other person? So it's like we have to be really careful, right? And one of the best ways to do that is really just to go under, right? To be able to go into a primary place where the other side can connect to it. um when we talk in concepts, and we talk in decisions, like, this is where I've arrived at, we miss the whole underlying primary experience of it. So just being able to dig deep into, what it was like for him, whether it was the mushroom experience, or, you know, what's it like now when you are sensing her getting upset, like, what's like happening in real time for you, right? Or in the case of like asking for this need, validating, like, what was it like to ask for her to do this for you, right? Like, this was not easy, right? This based on what I know about you, right?
Mhm.
Yes, it wasn't easy, right? And so it's very easy to get lost in that. This is what I needed in that moment, and then this is what was going on for me. Both experiences are what they were experiencing. They're both completely valid, but then going into one and getting underneath it, where if you get deep enough, she can come with and actually see what and be there for him. It's like, so EFT is about corrective experiences. So um, anytime the old cycle takes over, right? That's a uncorrective experience. That's an
Mhm.
experience that locks them in, reinforces the old cycle. So when we go under, these are opportunities to create a repair. That's what corrective experiences really are. Whether it's a repair of what happened this week, whether it's a repair of like what's going on for me in relation to my whole life. Like, if I go into my childhood and I talk about my familiar feeling, and how, whatever my mom or dad or whoever else did, I took away this horrible belief about myself, and about how I had to choose, attachment with my mom over, my own autonomy, my own authenticity. And if you can do that in session, you're able to like do this deep repair, utilizing the other person as the attachment figure, right? But that's what it's all about, right? So the goal is always, how do we go deeper and allow the other side to come alongside us, right? By first, we're being there alongside the client. We're able to connect to their experience. We're able to validate, um, make them feel really heard. That drops them down, with the risk sometimes of the other person not getting it at first, because they're not into their experience yet. So we
Mhm.
have to kind of validate the other side. Just give me a few minutes. I'll be there. I know this is hard for you. I'm just going to focus on him for a few minutes. We're going to come right back to you. Of course you want to follow through on that. So if you're saying 3 minutes, don't take
Yeah.
10 minutes, right? But whatever amount of time you think you need, you then once you get under, it speaks for itself, because now she can connect to it. In that raw secondary version, she can't understand, she can't connect with it. In the same way that if you go to her and you're in this top level and like, sorry, I couldn't be there for you, or like, this is what you needed to do in that moment, this is the solution, why couldn't you just stand up for whatever it was, like, he can't connect to that, of course, right? And so it's right, but from your objective neutral stance, you can understand both sides. And the way to get the other side to understand is you have to go under,
Mhm.
while making sure the other side stays somewhat grounded. They don't have to be fully grounded, right? But they can't be escalated, because then you're going back and forth into the cycle,
Yeah.
and then you're losing wherever you're at. So if you need to validate here and there, if you have to put your hand on their knee, if you have to be really calm, be like, like, I know this is really hard to hear right now, right? And your experience is important too, or your version of events is really important too. Thank you for sharing that. I really want to come back to it, but just give me a moment. I'm just going to finish with him. So it's you're utilizing your own attachment, your own relationship, and because you see her individually, that might give you more ability to do that caressing, so that you can work with him a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Um, so all that's kind of how you utilize that relationship, um, to your benefit, to your advantage.
Yeah, and I found yesterday in session, because client B was quite expressive compared to what he typically is, I kind of did a little bit of trying to validate client A in the sense of like just kind of be there with me for this moment. And we kind of went a little bit deeper with client B, and we were able to kind
Yeah.
of bring up how client B has always felt unheard, and his words and what he has to say doesn't mean much. And
And how did A receive that? Is that hard?
A put her hands on client B when he started to express how he
What
feels
does that
unheard.
mean? Put her hand on him.
Just put her
Like,
hand on his shoulder and started rubbing
okay.
his back. So
Hmm.
I picked up on the kind of the physical cues that were kind of happening in the room, like
Yeah.
softening there, that
Yeah.
were not verbal.
Hmm.
And that was quite different from
Yeah.
what I typically
So
see.
you got him deep enough that she responded in a compassionate, like,
Yeah.
empathic way, like she wants to be there for him.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
So that was kind of that step. And it was interesting because towards the end, you could tell client B, like it was a lot. It was a heavy session. Um,
But
and
at the same time, it was reinforcing. Like, I can do that again. I could do it in session now because I've had a good experience.
yeah,
Maybe I could even do it at home.
mhm. Because I've never seen client B get that deep or even show that much emotion in a session. It's quite neutral, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes like elevated in
Mm-hmm.
tone or voice,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
not that much expression.
Right. And that's it, right? So you can, the only thing left there really is, that's an enactment in and of itself. And whether you're passing the ball, so to speak, with him getting to turn to her, or even just doing it yourself, like, what's that like to see him this way and have her respond, or open up make explicit what you're seeing. So, wow, she's touching your shoulder, whatever. What's that like for you as you're kind of going deeper, and what's it like to have her respond in this way? You're not even bringing explicit the verbal, the direct stuff. You're just the nonverbals. You're bringing it into his awareness. Like, he's aware she's touching him, but then you're giving him the voice, like, what's that like? And then for her to understand and hear, this is okay. This feels good for him, right?
Yeah.
All of those things you're bringing in order to help create the connection of what's happening. And then, of course, you can reward it after by summarizing and kind of like threading the needle of, like, the ribbon, where you could say, wow, you took this huge step today. You haven't done this in 10 sessions. This is the first time you've been able to do this. And wow, look, when you did allow yourself, or allowed when you were able to take this courageous step like you did today, you responded in this amazing way that actually ended up, like you said, feeling really good for you, like a weight's like falling, down or something like that, however to use their language, right?
Yeah.
And that all of that helps to reinforce this, like, so it's not just this sort of situation where I just jumped off of the bridge, or I just kind of went on the roller coaster and I just like held my breath. No, it allows you to stay in it and also give words to it so that they understand what it is that they just did. That's
Mhm.
what makes psychoed so different, like preemptive psychoed versus,
Pers-
psychoed now. This is what you did. In some ways, it's not even psychoed, it's just describing what you did and
Mhm.
how amazing it is. It's more really validation and just reinforcement, and just like making alive what you saw so that they can hear back almost as a reflection of the work that they did, right? So that they can almost hear it in a more prefrontal sort of way to help process what just happened.
Yeah, and I'm curious how that would have looked differently yesterday if I were to have kind of acknowledged um, the hand on the shoulder and kind of that rubbing. I wonder what it would have looked like if we were to have paused in that moment and kind of brought that to his
Hmm.
attention.
That's the processing. So in the new version of EFT, where we've got our 5 steps instead of the 9 steps, that's the tango. Is the fourth step is processing what just happened, and so bringing it alive. So like we're processing what just happened, and then in the fifth step, we're just summarizing what we noticed in order to turn that into this like understanding, and sometimes into homework and things like that, so that you could go, oh, can you try, if you have a chance, can I'm not saying it in order for you this to be like a pressure, but if you have this opportunity and you have these 2 paths, you have your old cycle where you have, this like this sense to shut down, to walk away, and you have this, what you just did now in your memory, and you have these 2 things. This is so hard to do. This is easier. This is what you're used to, but if you can sit with it, and if you feel safe enough to try this, try what you just did here, right?
Mm.
With it being like, with the recency effect of it being your most recent experience, you have
Yeah.
an opportunity now to do it. There's no shame in going back. You can always go back, but now you have this new path, this new door. And if you can do it on your own, how amazing would that be? You made the decision, I wasn't there. And if she can respond in this way, how amazing would that be, right? Just setting up the opportunity of it.
Yeah. And I think going forward, just hearing what you said, Ophir, I think I'm kind of skipping over to step 5 and summarizing and not really doing step 4 as much as I need to, I think. Just hearing that, I think I need to
Yeah,
on
just
that.
stay in it. As long as much time as you have, you especially when it's so rare for him to do this,
Yeah.
just sit in there as long as possible, right? As
Okay.
long as it's comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, and then to like process how good it also feels to be in the space too after the fact. It can be really powerful. And then also give him the credit for it. Also, how amazing is this for you, A, to see B do this? Like, what's that like? And how easy was it for you to just come and put your hand on him? What allowed you, in how he was expressing himself, to know to put your hand on him, right? What's
Mhm.
different about how he shared? This is all this kind of stuff that like gives them this like um auxiliary, like why did it work? We're just trying to understand this. We acknowledge it worked, but now why did it work? Let's come up with the understanding. What did you do? What did she do? All that kind of stuff to help them, as from whatever you see. There's so much going on, but whatever
Yeah.
you can pull on, and as much as you can get them involved in that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think this helps me. Like I really noticed yesterday just having him express more than he typically does and kind of getting deeper with him and noticing those nonverbals. I think now going into next session, hopefully we can keep going a little bit deeper. Um,
Hmm. And that's where that like validation of, wow, you took such a courageous step today. I know I could see that wasn't easy for you,
yeah.
right? And then, wow, look at how, she was able to respond to it. Like this, like making that connection, right? You're
Yeah.
validating him, her response validates him. He can then integrate it all later.
Yeah.
But I got to run. I've got a 3 o'clock supervision.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Feel free to join if you like. It's a couples one
Okay. Thank you
if
so
you're
much.
available.
All
No
right.
problem.
Take care.
Take care. All right,
Bye.
bye.